Good evening. It is good to see everybody tonight. Thank you all for coming out tonight for tonight's GulfChat. We want to certainly thank the National Maritime Museum for allowing us to be able to come here tonight and have this GulfChat with you tonight. I understand that there's been a lot of good topics and a lot of things that have been discussed over the last few months, and so it's an honor and a privilege to actually be able to be with you tonight to talk about something we think is most important to our environment and to the people that are here. I'm Troy Ephraim with Ephraim & Associates Environmental Consulting. We are working under the direction and leadership of the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program, and we are working in concert with our team members, Thompson Engineering, as well as Environmental Science and Associates. So that collective collaboration has been able to take the last 18 to 20 months and begin to put some of the semblance of this plan together of the Western Delta Watershed Management Plan that we're going to share with you tonight. So we titled our chat tonight, Empowering Delta Communities for Conservation and Clean Water. So our talk is going to stay along that line. I was toggling with trying not to be too scientific and talk over anybody's head. So at some point I do get carried away, just raise your hand and that'll tell me to come on back this way, okay? So again, we want to thank you so much. And as you can see, we're all about the environment. We're all about empowering our communities to understand the beauty and the power of our natural resources, where we live, how important they really are to us, but how we coexist with them peacefully, safely. Tonight we're going to have a beautiful discussion and hopefully some good discovery about the direction of the Western Delta Watershed Management Plan. So, just so anyone that's here didn't know, we want to make sure we didn't want to assume either. When we talk about what is a watershed, well, it simply is just as the graphic shows. A watershed is an area in which is pretty much derived from rain. Let's take a point yesterday. So when the rain comes down, it hits certain landscapes, it hits certain landforms, and it finds its way into the roadside ditches. The roadside ditches find their way into the nearest creek. The nearest creek leads to the nearest stream. The nearest stream leads to the nearest river. The nearest river goes into the bay system, and then it ends up into the Gulf of Mexico. But it is the collection of all of these areas to one specific location in here, which can be considered to be an estuary, or in most cases, Mobile Bay, in our thinking, that allows us to be able to look at the holistic approach of what happens when we get areas that are inundated with rain, and what happens to that rain when it comes down. Well, once we got a watershed, we have to figure out, well, what's the plan? How do we put a plan around that? Well, it's important to understand that it's not just the environment. Putting a watershed management plan requires two other key components: the people, who lives there. Some of the things that the steering committee that we've been meeting with for the last 18 to 20 months, we've been sitting down with stakeholders and we've been getting their input, and we're going to ask you to give your input to us tonight again on our survey. But we've been asking their input. What's going on in the community around you? What's changing? What are you identifying that needs to be looked at from an environmental standpoint? And we've been very fortunate to get good feedback. And then the cultural heritage. What's so unique and so beautiful about the Western Delta Watershed Complex is that not only is it one of the most beautiful environmental landscapes that you'll find right here in Mobile County, but the people. They're unique, they're special, they're beautiful. But then the cultural heritage ties it all in together. And from that, we take the science, we take the people, and we figure out how to allow us to coexist peacefully and beautifully together. So these are the 6 core values from the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program that is pretty much the guiding premise that all watershed management plans are derived from. And they simply are: access to water in open spaces, the coastlines, our beaches and other shorelines, water quality, which perhaps is the most key tenet of a watershed management plan. We'll talk about that here shortly. Fish and wildlife, very important. We're here in the Gulf Coast. We love our fish. We love our wildlife. We love our coastlines. Then environmental health and resilience. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. And then heritage and culture, as I mentioned earlier. So these 6 core values are the values that drive the watershed management plan. So there are goals. It's not enough just to figure out what we want to do. We have to have a sense of direction. Where do we want to go with this plan? The goals of the watershed management plan are fairly straightforward, and we'll touch on these. And certainly there's one word we're going to talk about a lot tonight, and that's water quality. You're going to hear that word a whole lot. So when we put a watershed management plan together, we want to figure out how do we improve water quality. Well, the word improve automatically indicates there's got to be something wrong. We can't assume that all of our water quality, the drinking water, the water we swim in, is safe. It's not harmful for us. So there's always an attempt to improve it. Then we have to improve the habitats, those buffers, those natural native buffers that are adjacent to our streams and our bays and our water systems. And then we want to protect the continued customary uses of our biological resources. That's a collection of the improving of water quality and the improving of our habitat. And then we improve the watershed and community resilience. How do we figure out how to bounce back? After yesterday's storm, a lot of people had to figure out how do we regroup? How do we start again? If you had real bad storm damage and you're on the coastal areas or you're within the bay systems or you're within inland water systems, you probably had either flooding, you probably had a lot of rising water on your property, or you had a lot of damage. And if you were not too fortunate, you ended up having hurricanes, tornado. So we talk about improving the watershed to figure out what can we do to make sure that you don't have as much of an impact when we have storms like we had yesterday. Resilient, being able to bounce back. We're going to talk about that a little bit later tonight as well. And then expand opportunities for community access. It's not easy for people to be able to get to the areas that they want to enjoy and love if they don't own it or if they don't already live adjacent to it. We all love our coast. We all love where we live. But not everyone has that direct access to get to it. Working with the watershed management plan allows us to try to find areas, undeveloped land, maybe other lands that are owned by people, that we can have access. Allow people to enjoy the beauty of what we all love, whether we own it or not. And then certainly, this is the beauty of this plan. Many of you were looking at the board outside. Well, this is basically a replica of that same board. Our watershed management has broken down into 4 sub-watersheds. Cold Creek, Gunnison Creek, Bayou Sarah, and Lower Chassaw. If you look at the data here for the sub-watersheds, this pretty much gives you the indication of just how huge this area is. We're talking about 78,150 acres within the watershed, over 1.2 million linear feet of stream, and 17,000 acres of wetlands, one of the largest, most ecologically sound watersheds that we have. So when we initially started this, we put a survey out. And the survey was to get initial input to figure out how do we drive this plan. The plan has to be driven by the people. The plan has to be established for us to be able to know, well, what are we looking at? What's most important to the people that are in these areas that we just showed you here? What do they care about? What's important to them? So in those results, this is what we came up with. The 4 highest was water quality and pollution. No secret there. None at all. Then number 2 would be what? Litter, which falls in with low water quality. Okay? They work hand in hand. And then everything that we were dealing with yesterday, flooding. And the last was, the next top one was recreational access, development, industry, hazardous materials, invasive species, and others that were listed. But is it not a surprise to you that the highest one, water quality and pollution, and the other one, litter, all came together yesterday in our community, in our area? And we'll show you just exactly to what extent it did. So when we talk about the issues and the challenges that were pointed out in the survey, these were the top 4. Water quality impairment, where you have sediment that is not caught or contained on construction sites, especially development that is on the adjacent borders of our natural resources. Our wetlands, our streams are oftentimes the areas where everybody wants to develop. But if the construction best management practices that these developers don't employ are not in place, we usually have what you see here. A significant amount of sedimentation that is not trapped and it ends up into the wetlands. And then infrastructure failure. This is a recurrent problem. And just so you know, all of our peaks we've taken are within our watershed. So we're not pointing out issues that we think would be problems. We're pointing out problems by what you see. Infrastructure failure turns out to be issues relative to sanitary sewer overflows, which causes erosion and scour from floods and rains. And this is pretty much a commonplace thing we have, not only in all of our urban areas, but also in some of our suburban areas and rural areas where there are sewers. And then litter and flooding. Remember we mentioned earlier to you about, well, what is a watershed management plan? We talked about when that rain comes down, this is where it usually hits initially, unless you're on the coast. If you're an urban inland person, this is where it ends up first. But at some point, it leaves here and it makes its way to the nearest creek and stream. So litter and flooding work hand in hand. And then there's limited recreational access, an issue that may not be that big of a concern to others, but is a lot big concern for people who don't feel as if they have the ability to access some of the natural, beautiful resources of our coastlines and our beaches. So the negative effects of urbanization are pretty clear. Just showed you a picture of litter and trash on a roadside ditch. Well, this is where it ends up. We have partners with the Osprey Initiative that actually goes out and put what they call litter getters in some of our bays and some of our streams and rivers water bodies. And as you can see, this well-developed contraption that they have, they put the little floaters here, the booms on the outer edge across the width of the water body. And as the waters are flooding from heavy rains, and this happened yesterday, not this picture, but this is what happens when all of that water eventually leaves off the road and makes its way into the bays. And so they go out and they get all the litter that's been trapped in here and they carry it out. This is one of the biggest issues that we have when we're talking about the negative impacts of urbanization, impervious surfaces. We all want development, we all want growth, but urbanization comes with a price. It comes with the price of growth, development, people, trash, litter, activity, and eventually ends up to the one place we don't want it. Pollutant delivery, flooding, erosion, and decreased groundwater recharge, which is another key issue that we dealt with yesterday. If your backyard this morning or your front yard was full of water, that was all your groundwater coming up to the surface because after all that rain, it was like a sponge, you couldn't hold it anymore. So that's what happens. And we'll talk about the impacts of groundwater recharge here in just a little bit when we talk about Brownsfields. All right, so the second question that we had, what do you feel is the greatest strength in the watershed? So we did a sort of a flip of the coin. We talked about what do you consider to be the biggest problem? Now we want to talk about what do you see to be the biggest strength? What's positive? Well, no surprise, what won out? Natural resources. Natural resources in terms of where do we live? What do we have access to? What's valuable to us? What do we hold close to us in terms of our environmental community? Natural resources was number one. Recreational access opportunities, believe it or not, was number two because people actually care that they don't have access to get to places they want to. It's not enough just to go down to the coast for a beach on the weekend or vacation. People want to have the access closer to home. They want to be able to get there without having to drive 2 to 3, 4 hours. And part of the plan is trying to figure out lands and properties that we can actually help allow that to happen by coordinating, communicating with our local governments or private landowners. And then number three was culture and history. Why is that a strength? Because the people are the community. The community are the people. And they care about where they live. They care about the neighbors. They care about the quality of life. So naturally, this would be the number three. And then economic prosperity, social stability and justice, cohesive and engaged communities, no comments so far from reliable communication and mobility, and other was not filled in at all. So with the data that we've come up with, and there were more questions on the survey, and for those of you who have not taken our survey, we're going to probably have a repetitive statement tonight. Take the survey, fill it out, because that information helps us continue to plan, helps us continue to drive the initiative for the Western Delta Plan. But when we get the data that we have from the survey, we start to put the plan to figure out, well, how do we envision a healthy watershed? Based on some of the key tenets, the core values, the things that people said are strengths, and the things that people said aren't enough of. So we're focusing on our natural resources. We're focusing on our access, and we're focusing on our history and our culture to help drive the plan. So let's take a look at our history and cultural significance of the Western Delta Complex. Something that I wanted to touch on earlier in the map was that because the area is so large, the Western Delta Complex is especially unique because of the municipalities and the communities that are within the complex that are overlapping. We have 7 cities, towns, or municipalities that are within this complex. And so they're overlapping. So can you imagine a watershed that is this large, with so many people, so many boundaries, so many municipal jurisdictions, so many police precincts, so many jurisdictions, you have so much going on in this watershed that you have to sort of break it down and figure out, well, who are we trying to reach? Who are the people? What does this watershed look like based on who they are? Pritchard, Alabama. I'm going to let you read some of the history itself, but basically we wanted to put this slide in because every municipality that we looked at specifically and have gone out and looked into the communities in this watershed management plan have a rich, storied history. They all began somewhere. They all had a start. And they've all become viable, productive communities, whether they're the second largest city in Mobile County or the small little town of maybe 700, 800 people. Our cities, our towns, our communities, they're valuable. But when we looked at the history and the culture, we also realized we needed to look at the problems that were derived from the information that we got from the surveys. And here's what we found for Pritchard: deterioration, flooding, stormwater management issues, and of course SSOs. And I think everyone's familiar with the SSOs issues in the city of Pritchard. There are a number of developments and other housing communities in there, underserved, overlooked, and as a result of failing infrastructure, there's a lot of flooding. There's a lot of SSOs. The sanitary sewer overflows are a result of when you get anything outside of you have stormwater and groundwater that infiltrates into those particular sanitary sewers, which are supposed to be separate, but they're not always the case because they're ailing. The infrastructure is not correct. So as a result, you end up having sanitary sewer overflows actually within some of the same areas where you have flooded streets. The city of Mobile, where we are today. Beautiful history. It is the hub of Mobile County. Everything goes through the city of Mobile. The city of Mobile has a lot of great history, a great future. But it also, too, has its key problems as well. One would be several brownfield sites. And we're pointing out certain things, but just about every municipality usually have 3 or 4 of the same challenges as far as water quality impacts. We're talking about brownfields, and those are areas that have the presence or real perceived pollution or contamination in the ground that has not been properly abated or resolved. There are brownfield grants that you can get to clean up these sites, but they're very expensive once the assessments. Getting the assessments are easy. It's having the funding to do the cleanup of the contaminated property. These brownfields are normally contaminated in the ground. So when you think about what happens yesterday when we had a high groundwater recharge from all the flooding and these are contaminated properties in the ground, where do you think that water's going? Where do you think it ends up? So brownfields are a key issue that we're focusing on in this watershed plan. Africatown. Africatown is not a city. It's not a municipality, but it is the hub of the city of Mobile that has garnered a lot of history and a lot of attention of late due to the Clotilda slave ship and the citizens and the residents and the histories of all the residents that were a part of that whole Clotilda dynamic. Africatown is pointed out here in our plan, though specifically mainly because if you look at the lower Chassaw, which we'll point to in just a little bit, there's only so much of the city of Mobile that's actually within the lower Chassaw sub-watershed. It just so happens that 65% of that area is the Africatown community. So in fact, when we realized that, we figured let's focus on an area that has a lot of rich history, that is coming back, and the resurgence is beautiful, but it also still has its key issues. They've had significant environmental challenges, obviously due to industrial pollution. They've been underserved, they've been overlooked, they've been marginalized, but they're on the mend. But that does not mean that they still don't have challenges environmentally. And ask anyone over there, they'll tell you some of the problems that people say are no longer there, they're still there. This watershed management plan will allow us to go in and continue to talk to the residents, meet with them, and figure out what are the challenges environmentally that we could help fix by putting this plan together. Coming up with better solutions is the ideal aspect of what we're trying to get accomplished. City of Chickasaw. And this is a pretty exhaustive list because we have a lot of cities and towns here. Chickasaw, the city just north of Pritchard, Alabama. Rich history, great people, small town feel. Chickasaw may be one of the best kept secrets for anybody that wants to live in a nice, quaint neighborhood, and you rarely ever hear a car drive down the street. You rarely ever hear anybody hollering up the street like I do when I used to come as a kid. One of the most quaint, most quiet, most under-the-radar cities that you'll ever imagine. But they, too, have a key issue: discharge issues. The city of Chickasaw and the city of Pritchard share the same sanitary sewer issues because those two cities' infrastructures are linked. So the problem in Pritchard is also a problem in Chickasaw and vice versa. They have a lot of issues with pathogens. 8 Mile Creek, which is not in this watershed, it's adjacent to it. It's also impacted by a lot of the issues that are in the Chickasaw area. And as you look and see right here, it talks about highly urbanized. Highly urbanized, again, basically talks about the influx of people. So in the Lower Chassaw and in the Bayou Sarah watershed, sub-watersheds, you'll see there's a lot more people living down here. Why? Because it's Mobile, it's Pritchard, it's Chickasaw, it's Saraland. But as you get further north, we're not as much urbanized anymore. We become more rural. And the impacts are a little different, but they don't change. City of Saraland, one of the fastest growing cities that you can imagine. A great place to grow, great school system, great place to live, shop. It is becoming the new mecca of Mobile County. It has already exceeded some other municipalities that a lot of people felt would be where the city of Saraland is. They have done a beautiful job of harnessing their strength, harnessing their growth, and putting a plan around it. But even the city of Saraland has its issues with SSOs. Saraland has experienced a significant amount of flooding, and that's mainly because if you look at the actual quantity of streams and water bodies that are actually intertwined within a particular community, whether it be residential, commercial, or business or industrial, most of Saraland is intertwined with a lot of natural waterways, a lot of natural water bodies. So this is one of the reasons why we have a lot of flooding affiliated with the city of Saraland. But the SSOs is another problem still as well. Satsuma, the same situation. Small, beautiful location. We just had a steering committee meeting there, and they have some of the best recreational access opportunities that you can imagine in Mobile County. Some of the best places to go fish, some of the best places to just go have a picnic, some of the best places to just go and enjoy yourself. If you just want to get away, I encourage anybody to go down to Satsuma Creek Lodge and enjoy yourself. That's one of the best kept secrets. One of my steering committee, Ms. Ruth's here. She's shaking her head because she knows that's one of the best places you can possibly go and enjoy yourself. And it says it here, a growing community. They recognize the importance of protection of this natural environmental and the balances and the need for growth and economic development, and they're good at it. But they, too, have issues. Putting in this subdivision, which I have history with, by the way, was not the best thing to do along the borders of Steel Creek. It looks like this now, and this picture was 3 years ago. Why? Because you cannot change the location of where you put your development that close to a natural resource that is going to be susceptible to that level of rise from tide gauge, okay? Climate vulnerability challenges are real in the city of Satsuma, and as a result, one of the best kept neighborhoods, these townhouses are sought after. There are so many people trying to get, which is amazing. We were doing some studies. Somebody stopped us, asked us what we were and what we were doing, who we were. He saw the shirts, and we explained to him. And she told us, well, we were on a waiting list for 5 years. We couldn't wait to get here. And she was even nice enough to tell us how much she paid for it. And when she told us how much she paid for it, and I said, well, what unit do you have? She says, I'm right here. I said, I'm standing in the parking lot. I said, you're right there? She said, hmm. I said, how is it when it rains? She says, oh, we just wait it out. All right. I won't get ahead of me. I'll explain the lesson in that. Creola, great city. Mayor Nelson, City of Creola, has been a great steering committee member. I'm surprised he's not here with us. He called me the other day. He has adopted this plan in his heart because the River Delta Marina and Campground, which is funded by the county, Mobile County Commission, is one of the best tourist locations and best snowbird locations in South Mobile County. Would you believe that? Right here. at the River Delta Marina. Great place. I love to go there. As a matter of fact, if you took notice of that beautiful picture that was on the entry slide when we started the presentation, if most of you know that area, that picture was taken from a pier on the backside of the pier there, going out into the Delta. The alligator, that picture was taken while he was there. So everything in this slide is real. We did not Photoshop anything. All right. I love Creola, but Creola has one of the worst issues you can imagine. Point source pollution and non-point source pollution that is derived from a lot of activities. And at the end of the day, what we're realizing is that while there may be permits to allow some of these activities to take place, every municipality has some form of department that deals with stormwater runoff, stormwater management. Every municipality has ordinances and resolutions that's supposed to manage this, but not every municipality has people who understand the value of making sure that when things like this are going on, it's their responsibility to find a solution to it. We help them with that solution when we give them the plan. The science and the data that we put together in the watershed management plan helps them do a better job of figuring out how to edit, how to modify your resolution and your ordinance to prevent this from happening. And then Axis. Axis didn't have a nice little gateway board we could take, but we drove up there and we realized the one thing they have is a heavy industrial corridor within the watershed management plan. Every major industry that's along 43 is just about inside the watershed management plan. And they're located just south of the Cold Creek sub-watershed and affixed permanently within Gunnison watershed. So we realize that these plants are regulated by the federal government, they're regulated by the state. Yet we constantly have this. Point source discharge, which is basically permitted discharge, we hope, that comes from particular industries or businesses that are allowed to allow so much of that material, that substance, to leave the facility by way of a pipe, point source, okay? And they factor it in terms of total we call it TMDL in the science world. I'm not going to get scientific. That's total maximum daily load. That means they have so much they can allow to be discharged into that water body that they feel will not be harmful or impactful to you if you're fishing down the road or down the stream, or if you're out there swimming, or if you just want to walk with your feet in the water. You come back and you wonder why your toes black. All right? This is what happens. All right? So, I mean that picture is probably one of the best pictures we have about the recurrent problems that we have. And we're not pointing a finger. We're bringing up the key issues in this watershed plan because we're here to put a plan around it. We're here to try to solve these problems and help our cities and towns figure out how to prevent these issues from recurring. Now, I'm going to do my very best not to get scientific here. This is a great map that was put together by one of our partners at Thompson, Tim and Suzanne and Mary. They're here with us tonight. This is Lower Chassaw. Now, we've got 3 other sub-watersheds. I chose Lower Chassaw because this is the closest one to where we are. And I'm going to define this for you real quick. This legend here talks about all the natural resources, whether it's fresh water, emergent, freshwater forested, freshwater pond, lake, riverine, estuarine, or marine system. All right? All of these are captured in here. But then when we go on this side of the legend, we see issues in terms of RCRA, okay, as well as Clean Water Act issues. These are the areas that you will see in these little dots, these little squares. The purple squares and the green squares are reflective of these. And this is where you have a look across the top. It says 303D. These are on the clean water list of impaired contaminated water bodies. The entire Lower Chassaw, that's where we've been talking about tonight, and we've shown you pictures. The entire Lower Chassaw reach of Chickasaw Creek, all right? Here's the lower reach coming down this way, going into the bay, Mobile River into the bay. The entire Lower Chassaw reach of Chickasaw Creek is listed for mercury from atmospheric deposition and for E. coli due to pasture grazing and urban runoff. Can't do anything about the cows relieving themselves. Dogs, cats, animals, that typically happens. But what we're finding and what we're looking at in this situation is that these streams are impaired mostly due to water quality from sedimentation. and other things that are ending up into the systems from stormwater runoff that's not captured where it should be captured. Okay? So the streams are impaired. Just about all of the streams that we're focusing on in our sub-watersheds have some level of impairment. Empowering communities, the role of environmental justice in the watershed. This map is a little bit more challenging to find, but it's pretty clear. Chickasaw, Pritchard, City of Mobile, and just above here at Satsuma are all areas that have been designated for having a high concentration of brownfields. We talked about what brownfields were earlier. Properties that have been abandoned, underutilized, that have been left alone because of contamination, whether it was a gas station, a refinery, whether it was a fueling tank, if they had some form of an oil, petroleum, or some type of oil substance that operated at that location for years and they packed up and they left, they took the money and they ran. And they left us with the problem. Our watershed, the sub-watershed of Lower Chassaw, is littered with them. Look at the concentration in red of all the brownfield sites that we have collected in Pritchard, Chickasaw, even Satsuma, and in the city of Mobile. So what do we want to do as far as empowering our communities to learn more and know more about this? Well, the first thing we need to do is raise awareness of the environmental harm. How many of you are even aware of a brownfield prior to coming here tonight? You may have heard about it. Okay, that's only 2 hands out of a lot of people in here, 3 maybe. Okay, not a lot of people realize that brownfields are perhaps one of the more highly contaminated issues that we have that are overlooked and underfunded in terms of being able to rectify, remedy, and abate the problem. So we have to bring awareness. People need to know what's going on with the abandoned mill that lives down the street, that exists down the street from you. Then we have to be able to articulate the risk. That's one of the key things in the plan. It's not just enough to point the problem, you need to explain it so people understand just what harm may be there. Provide a platform for the needs. When we provide a platform for the needs, we basically allow them to understand this is a problem, here's what you need, and the data that we're compiling will help us figure out how we can do a better job of not only assessing, but getting funding to do the cleanup so that we no longer have an abandoned, blighted, underutilized property next to us that's contaminated. And remember, I showed you the picture earlier with the city of Mobile. You've got a piece of property there that's abandoned, been cleared off, the contamination's in the ground, it floods, it rains, where does it go? This is what's happening in this whole dynamic. And then perhaps the most important thing, it takes funding, which means it takes advocacy. People have to be concerned. People have to be aware. And then we work with that same group, figure out how we can be advocates together. Remember the picture I showed you earlier? People, environment, culture, and history. Those 3 circles have to come together to be advocates for getting the funding from the necessary entities, be it federal, state, county, or municipal, to help us figure out how do we get rid of this problem. And the beauty about brownfield is that they do have the opportunity for productive reuse. There are a lot of test cases where there have been some very bad brownfields, but because people did it the right way, they assessed it, they put a cleanup plan together, they found productive new buyers, new industries, they came in and they turned that location from a problem to a plus. And that's the value that you have here. In our plan, that's one of the things we like to be able to give a flow chart to help people figure out how to address that situation. And then, empowering communities, it all begins with the plan. The Western Delta Watershed Management Plan is one of many plans, but it is the most important plan for the sub-watersheds that are affected by that plan. What are we going to have in that? We're going to have ways to deal with water quality improvement. We're going to find ways to further protect, enhance, or restore our habitats. Environmental education. People need to know. I don't care if they're in the kindergarten up to 12. We have to find a way to educate our kids because, you know, when I was the mayor of Pritchard, forgot to tell y'all that. Don't be alarmed. All right. When I was the mayor of Pritchard, it amazed me that a lot of the kids didn't realize that the candy wrapper, the potato chip bag, and the Coke can that they just bought at the store would end up in our systems, in our streams, in our rivers the minute they threw it on the street. And we had an educated program to actually go out and teach the kids about not littering. We had an anti-litter campaign. City of Mobile has one. Every municipality that we checked into our watershed plan, all sub-watersheds, all municipalities have a litter control program. But that's not enough. Then we have to strengthen community resilience. That's the ability for us to be able to bounce back. We bounce back pretty good. Bad storm, look at all of you that's in here tonight. Good crowd, regardless of what happened yesterday. That's because there's infrastructure in place to make sure that flooded streets, flooded areas don't stay flooded for very long. But that doesn't mean the problem's fixed either. We have to continue to advocate for increased funding. The problems don't go away. They only recur. They keep coming back. So if we put a plan together, we use that plan to identify the challenges and the problems, and we try to use that plan to advocate and to solicit the necessary monies that are needed to try to resolve the issues. That's how we empower our communities. These are 5 key tenets to help us figure out how to give them a voice to deal with the issues that they deal with. Water quality improvement. We've got to deal with these SSOs. This particular picture here is 40 yards from a water body. 40 yards. Now, it's been cleaned up since then. But when this picture was taken, it was 40 yards from a water body. We used to do trainings with the city of Mobile, talking to them about their illicit discharge detection, which this would be an illicit discharge. Okay? Anything that gets into our waters and our water bodies and our streams and our systems, other than rain and groundwater, is considered an illicit discharge. And this is one of the worst ones. This is a classic SSO. And if you can look at the picture, you can tell wherever this is going, it's not good. So do you want your kids playing in a water body that's near this? Do you want to be near it? Of course not. So we've got to find a way to improve our water quality by prioritizing infrastructure upgrades and municipal enforcement. This particular picture here was one of the biggest violations we had in one of our, I'm not going to call them out, but in one of our municipalities. This developer was told numerous of times that he had certain limits in which he could put the material on this industrial development site. When we went out and identified the problems, even when they went out and put the silt fencing in, look at what happened as a result of them not getting to it fast enough. This is Chickasaw Creek, one of the 303D listed impaired streams due to sedimentation, water quality issues. When we actually had to come out and clean this out, we actually went inside this wood line in the wetland to actually determine just how much sedimentation that had accumulated within the benthic, or let me come out of the science, Troy, that actually accumulated within the bottom of the system. We put in what we call meters, or what we call ground meters, and we put the tube in, we marked it, measured it, and we put it down and we drilled down. We had over 4 feet of sediment in a system that was only 3 feet high at depth. You literally choked out that water body with this development. Now here's the thing about this development. There ain't nothing there. In 7 years after this site was resolved with the state and with the federal government, the Corps of Engineers, for wetlands impact and non-point source violation, there's nothing there. They're selling the property. What might have happened had they known in advance how to manage this construction site this close to such a valuable resource? Would have made a great difference. And then we need to protect and enhance and restore our habitats. This is a project, now this is one we don't have in our area, but I wanted to put it because we don't really have many good examples of living shorelines in our watershed, but that'll change. That's why this is up. And this is a site that some of us in here may be very familiar with, but this is an area where we have coastal marsh, forested wetland, and submerged aquatic vegetation underwater in this area. These are some of the most beautiful wetland systems that you could possibly have. You can truly enjoy yourself here. This dark area here are the SAVs. You can't see them, but you see the dark splotching? That's plant life underwater. Well, there are sometimes projects that want to impact that. Well, the key to what we do is we make sure that people realize that those areas are there so that they don't ruin this, and that perhaps maybe they can move down further the road and do exactly what they want to do and not impact this valuable resource. Education, knowledge. If they don't know, they don't know. And that's what happened to the guy in the picture. He didn't know, and he destroyed a beautiful system, and his development is gone. And then, love this picture here, community habitat gardens. I know a lot of times we think about community gardens, think about vegetables and fruits that are being grown, but a lot of times we just need green spaces. A lot of times we need areas where we can just have urban gardens, herbal gardens, places where kids can walk down a path and learn about plants, learn about flowers, and those areas will allow groundwater to actually accumulate there, and we don't have to worry about impervious surfaces. We've got natural, beautiful areas that kids can learn more about and get educated about. Very important that we do more of this. And then environmental education. Knowledge is still king. We have to develop a watershed management plan that improves upon the existing environmental programs, that's K through 12 included, that allows us to encourage environmental stewardship. That is perhaps one of the biggest words that we are selling to every city and town. There's got to be buy-in. What I'm encouraged about the most tonight is to see new faces that I've never seen before, that saw a little flyer in the email, that saw something on their phone, that say, hey, listen, we want to talk about empowering you to preserve your community, and you came in tonight just to see what this is all about. Knowledge is power, and we pray that your environmental stewardship, which starts with you filling out the survey, which will lead to you being a part of our group going forward, which will lead to you being more knowledgeable about the habitats and the natural resources that are constantly under threat, even when you don't realize it. And then being able to get out to places to talk about resilience. This is a group that we're working with here. That lady in the red right there is actually in the crowd. She may not have called herself there or not. But this is the City of Mobile is under a resilience plan. The resilience plan meaning is to allow them to identify the shocks, the stressors, and the things that can threaten and challenge. We had one yesterday. Now, we weren't shocked because we get it all the time. But it was a stress. Kids were out of school. Some people had to leave work. Some people's cars got flooded getting back home. There was a lot of issues that we had to deal with that rain yesterday, okay? So that was a stressor. Well, the stressor didn't last for long. 10 years ago when we had a rain like we had yesterday, downtown was locked up because people couldn't get there. That's changed. Knowledge. People know better. Infrastructure's changing. Improvements are being made. But we have to get better at it. And we do that by promoting smart growth practices and promoting community resilience. The smart growth practices basically is this. We all love growth. Mayors, cities, towns, developers, realtors, everybody loves growth. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the human way. We love our cities with tax bases. We love going places. But oftentimes, development comes at the expense of the natural environment. And when that happens, we lose what's really most important to us. You know, when we are able to get an equal balance between growth and development and preserving our natural habitats and allow them to mesh together and to become one, that's a beautiful thing. We see it in ecotourism projects, which are becoming more wholesale knowledgeable to a lot of people. So smart growth is basically determining when I come here, I don't want to destroy this wetland. I want this wetland to benefit my project. I want this wetland to enhance my project. I want to incorporate this development and make it part of this natural landscape. Some of the best projects incorporate both equally well. I don't care where you go in the South. When you see projects that have these nice little ponds in the center of these impervious surface shopping centers, or you've got these areas that are swelled with natural flow of waters and streams, and then you've got development over here, those are some of the best projects that you can imagine. So they get it right, and they call it smart growth. Some of the things we're looking at is trying to figure out how we can encourage our cities and towns to not just go after the first development, but make sure that you incorporate the natural landscape with it. And then promoting community resilience. Again, this is about the ability to bounce back when things happen in our environment, to be able to work through the challenges in dealing with the things that happen when we deal with storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, climatic changes, sea level rise. Climate vulnerability is real. All right, climate change is nothing like today like it was years ago. And it's only going to get worse. Okay, so how do we plan for that? We plan by being able to determine how do we become more resilient in our communities. How do we identify it? How do we plan? And what are our cities and towns and governments doing to protect our best interests in relation to community resilience? Community resilience. It's a work in progress. This happens to be the same site I showed you earlier with the guy with the track hoe pulling it out. When we took this picture, we said, well, here's the problem. We've got a point source discharge by way of this pipe. that's connected on the other side to a sediment pond. Sediment pond now. So you've got sediment on this side of the pipe, and the pipe is carrying out stormwater through here. What do you think is going to end up in the creek? Bad design, bad development. No wonder this is perhaps, if you go to some of these regulatory classes, they probably got this picture in the book. And I'm sure the state's got a picture of what not to do, because we had to submit all of this to them when this project came out. It was just that bad. So resilience is the capacity of individuals and communities and institutions, systems within a city to survive, adapt, and thrive. We did that yesterday. We've got a pretty, I'm hearing we're going to have a pretty challenging storm system ahead. I think we'll be ready. God forbid we get a storm we've never seen before. But I believe we'll be ready. Why? Because over time we've been able to learn how to survive it. We've gotten through many hurricanes. Power out, no ice, no food, can't drive, can't do it. We've gone down that road before. We come out, and then we adapt to it, and then we find a way to thrive despite of it, okay? No matter what the acute shocks or chronic stresses are that we experience, we find a way to keep living. Here's a descriptor that we were talking about the other day. So how do you describe resiliency from an environmental standpoint? How does nature become resilient? If man's constantly impacting it, if man's constantly doing things, if human nature is constantly the problem, how do you get a balance? Who's going to look out for the nature? Effective adaptive management is one of the key components of a watershed management plan. And this is a definition I came with on my own, so all you scientific people, if it don't make sense, call me, I'll explain it further. And if it don't make sense, then don't you say nothing. So effective adaptive management of man-made and natural resources towards short and long-term solutions, able to withstand and overcome stressors. Being able to put a plan together that adapts with it from the environmental standpoint. If something happens today that we've never seen happen before, what do? Just say, oh, well, that's life? No. We just figure out how to do something differently better, so that if we get this situation or this occurrence next time, we know how to prevent this from happening. We know how to keep this from being a negative impact on our natural resources. Here's another key component. We have to design projects that promote ecotourism and smart growth. Some of the biggest projects that are going to be the future are projects, as I said again, that incorporate the natural landscape with recreation, small-scale development, and retail. It's coming. Smart growth, we talked about that. And then water quality monitoring program, we can't get away from it. We have to continue to be able to do this. The watershed management plans are constantly requiring this to be done, constantly getting funding. The Mobile Bay National Estuary Program is constantly on the forefront of making sure that all of its watershed management plans and all of its areas, all of its jurisdictional boundaries are constantly getting some form of funding for water quality monitoring programs. It is essential. Low impact design projects in high urbanized areas. All right, that's LIDs. One of the biggest ones I can tell you about right now, rain barrels. We had a project over in the community in the city of Pritchard that we were fortunate to be a part of in collaboration with the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program that actually had a twofold benefit. It allowed people to be able to harness and capture the stormwater runoff from their roofs into these big old 50-gallon barrels that they were able to reuse for watering their grass, washing their cars, or just basically just being able to conserve water for whatever potable use that they felt they wanted except drinking. Okay? However, in this particular community, it just so happened that it fell within an area where a lot of the high water bills were. So when they were able to capture that much water and preserve it and use it elsewhere, that was less water that they had to turn the faucet on. So it saved them money by being able to have a place that they could actually conserve. LID projects are very important, and not just in the form of rain barrels. They could be garden swales. They could be bioswales, biological areas where we allow water to collect and accumulate and slowly release. Not sediment, but stormwater. Trying to trap it, keeping it natural and not letting it be impervious. Asphalt, concrete. We want less of that. And then comprehensive infrastructure planning. Being able to determine how best to deal with these leaking pipes, deteriorated pipes, the areas and the things that are contributing to these point source issues that you saw earlier, whether it's IDDE with SSOs or point source discharge coming out the back end of a plant. It does not matter. We have to have comprehensive infrastructure planning. to allow us to be able to get the funding to prevent these issues from happening, because they're happening every day. Comprehensive shoreline management planning. We love our beaches. We love our shorelines. But we have to do a better job of making sure they stay that. Okay? There are projects out there for beach nourishment. That's a great thing. But there are also some projects out there, and there are also some beaches and shorelines out there that aren't getting the desired attention that they need. And then in the process of this, if we're going to do a comprehensive shoreline management plan, we need to find areas where we can actually do some living shorelines that will be able to be accessible by people who don't have waterfront property, who are not able to get down there and get to the coastline. Areas where they can actually see the benefit of what a natural shoreline looks like when you have all the components together: the plants, the animals, the fish, the people, nature, the beauty of it all. We want to shape the future of the Western Delta. This is by far one of the biggest, most unique, most special environmental dynamics that you'll ever see. And we're blessed because we're in it. We live in it. This is our home. This is who we are. This is what we're about. There are 15 watershed management plans that have been developed at the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program is currently seeking our thoughts and our observations for the next plan. One of the next plans is the watershed management plan of the Western Delta. We need your input. We need you to share your thoughts about what we need to know more of as we move further with this plan. And I love this, and this is taken actually from the Coastal Connection newsletter that the NEP puts out. Before the stream channels are repaired, before the floodplain is created, before the invasive plant species are replaced with natives, there is an extensive planning process. We're in the middle of it right now. Scientists and engineers, local municipalities and decision makers, and numerous other entities and organizations have to get involved. However, the process starts with each of you. We invite you to scan this QR code. You can do it now on your phone, but we've given some of you the cards when you came in, so you can use that there. And we thank you. I want to say appreciation to the National Marine Maritime Museum for being so kind and thoughtful to allow us to come and do this today. We want to thank the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program for leading the charge and allowing us to do this work for this watershed management plan of the Western Delta. Thompson Engineering, our partners, ESA, our partners, and of course, Ephraim and Associates Environmental. I want to thank my staff, Tammy, Michelle, Evan, Russell left, and the people that actually helped me get this thing together, and all the help we got from Christian and Shamika, Roberta, and everyone. This has been a team effort. So we trust that this has been informative for you. We trust this has been a good night for you. We've got an opportunity for some chatting and some Q&A right now. You can ask me anything. If you need me to go back and look at a slide, I'll go back. But if you've got questions, if you've got thoughts, anything that you want to know more about, then we want to talk about that right now as we close. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Well, just in case you're wondering, well, who's paying for all this? This is a disclaimer that we need to make sure that we say. This project is made possible from the federal funds under the award number that you see from the Gulf Coast Restore Council Act. And let me just say this, a lot of the environmental projects, and there has been, I can't even count. I don't know how many buckets there are. I don't know how many receptacles there are. But there's a lot of money that has come into our area as a result of the Gulf Horizon oil spill. Such a dramatic impact to a natural resource spurred on so much growth and so much funding to help preserve our natural environment. Something that happened way out in the Gulf of Mexico is allowing funding to help places that we live nearby us every day. So the Restore Act is a very, very viable tool that's allowed us to be able to put this plan together and to continue to put the science, the education, and the awareness in place so that we can have a better natural environment. Thank you, everyone. Any questions? We have refreshments. Please take some with you. We've got a few more minutes before they throw us out. So if you want to talk out there and mingle a little bit, please do. Again, I want to thank my team with Thompson, ESA, for working with us on this. Good to see a lot of friends, a lot of familiar faces, some of our stakeholders. Our steering committee members, thank you for being here with us tonight. It means everything to have you here with us. Okay? All right. Hey, Ms. Ruth.
The survey is short, but can our responses be long?
They can. They can, Ms. Ruth. In the other, have your way. Mayor Nelson said the same thing. Right. He said, I couldn't get it all out in one survey. He is. He is. He is. He has, he's excited about our plan. He's presented the draft components of it and what we're doing to the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Mr. Blankenship and his people, to see about getting additional funding for an ecotourism project that's going to be phenomenal. And he's leaning heavily on the contents of the plan that we're putting together. We don't have any projects yet, but we feel confident that with continued coordination with him, his project is going to be one of the best that we can come up with. It's going to be a beautiful project. Hey, Stacy.
Hey, how you doing? Quick question. With the other industry that's coming on that 43 corridor, are they being provided this plan in their processing? Is that any of this being factored into that? And I'm only saying that because all this beautiful work is wonderful, but if we consistently keep bringing industry on that corridor, doing the exact same thing, it's like, you know, how do we fix that issue if this is not incorporated?
That's a great question, Stacey, because we have our steering committee, but there's a group within that called the Lemoyne Community Association Partnership, and that's the Lemoyne Industrial Park. That's AXO, Alabama Power, Lenzing Fibers, EcoSouth, all of those industries that are along that particular corridor. They come to a monthly meeting. We're a part of that. We've been asked to be a part of that as a part of the NBNEP's team with the Western Watershed Management Plan. And every now and then they'll have us stand up and give an update on the plan. And they come to the meetings. They're active, they're listening, and they give us their input. But here's what's important. They're starting to send their environmental compliance people are coming to our meetings now. So they're there listening because two things they're doing. They're trying to give updates on how they're operating so that the residents, and Ms. Ruth can tell you this, they're there giving updates about what are they doing so people they don't want NIMBYs, not in my backyard issues coming up. So they're smart about getting out in front. But what they're also doing is trying to figure out how can they do a better job? How can they actually mean what they say when they say, we're here to be neighbors to you? And the Watershed Management Plan allows them to do that as we put it together. And we're putting it together with their input, especially when you talk about the point source issues that we're having, okay? Because they're permitted, but to what degree? It's always a question. All right. Yeah.
Our personal interest is in Africatown. I'm wondering how many of the industries there are doing the same thing they're trying to learn more about what you're doing. Are they also trying to mitigate their impact on the community?
No, we haven't. We haven't. We've not heard from any industry in that area at all yet. And another thing too, with the excitement and the obvious beauty of Africatown and the resurgence that's there, one of the keys of the plan is to try to figure out how we can work hand in hand, because a lot of the groups that are over there, it's like 4 or 5 groups that have a development and a historical and a cultural interest. And they want to figure out how to do it the right way. They don't want to just come in here and just build it. And as I mentioned to you earlier, there are a lot of brownfield issues in the Africatown community. So we're going to encourage them to turn those blighted, abandoned, contaminated properties into a productive reuse location. Okay? If you're going to build where there's already concrete. And let's not build where we've got natural ground. That's the beauty of brownfields. Being able to not have to bring in more concrete. Here's a location, here's a footprint. Go here. Leave these natural areas alone for us to do something different with, to enjoy it and get the viable benefit out of it. So that's one of the things we want to try to push. We had one meeting there, and it wasn't the best attended meeting. So we're trying to find ways to make sure that the people understand just this is a valuable tool. And we talked about that with the National Estuary Program. We didn't just want this to be a piece of document, 300 pages thick, whatever, sitting on a shelf drawing dust. We wanted this to be a living instrument that can be used over and over again to educate and help build the environment that we need to live in.
How far along in terms
We are at the 20-plus mark, okay, 20-plus month mark. And me personally, I feel we're a lot farther out because of how large the area is. If you saw that map, you realize this is a huge plan. We don't want to overlook any sub-watershed and the issues that are there. So if given the opportunity, and this is really having anything to do with funding, we're committed to putting this plan together and making sure that it does exactly what the plan requires it to do. So if we're looking at 6 months to another year and we're still on this plan, we're happy. Because I don't think you can get enough science and data into this plan to help resolve the problem. So we're committed for the long haul. I saw somebody else on the back row. Okay. Might have been somebody saying, we got to go. All right, so please, we've taken great lengths to have refreshments. If you hadn't already had any, please partake. Take some with you, okay? All right, again, your presence here tonight has been paramount. Thank you so very much, okay? Our information is here. You can go through the Mobile Bay NEP's website, and there's a link that will lead you to the Western Delta Watershed. I think, Dr. Pierce, you asked me about that. You got it? Okay, good. All right, look us up. All right? And I know it's one thing we probably didn't do. We didn't get a sign-in sheet so that we could add some of you to our steering committee as we go forward. But if you take the survey, that's just as important. And if you're interested in being a part of the process as we go forward, just look us up through there. All right? Contact us. And some of you I've given my number to, please call me. We want to get out to the schools. We want to talk to the college students, the K through 12. We want to educate them more. We've got something coming up here in a couple of weeks with Mobile Baykeeper, talking about LID. So we're excited about that. So any opportunity we get to express the beauty of this plan for this beautiful watershed that we have, we're going to do it.